G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day, and so far you're having a fantastic week. Now, I'm not traveling for a few days, I'm spending some time in Omaha, Nebraska for the wedding that I came to America for. So I've got a little bit more time to go a bit more in depth on some of the topics we will be speaking about today. So what are we going to speak about? Well, as per usual, we do have a lot to go over. We're going to look over strikes, aircraft, and the way weapons are used. We're going to look at maps, show you where things are moving. I need to talk about the battlefield situation, the salients that are being developed, and the reality of the battlefield is starting to set in many people around the globe as well. And I'll show you that and show you how some people are finally starting to see through some of the fog of war propaganda and the pseudo environment that has been created. We'll talk about the cost of Russia's summer offensive. We know that Russia is on offensive actions at the moment and is making ground at a pace, but of course that comes with another side. What actually is the loss here? And I want to show you then attrition ratios, even using these figures, aren't presenting what then these Western papers are trying to actually present from this. Attrition isn't as simple as just a constant or linear line. People want to present it like that because if they present it like that, you are not lying. If I say, 10 kilometers squared per day, it'll take 80 years to get this. I'm not lying in saying that. That is true. That is objectively true to say that. But what that does is it sets a pseudo environment of which you're not giving all of the information, you're giving some information to fit the outcome that you would like. That is not how the world works. It's not how life works. It's not how attrition works. It's not how if you put $1,000 in the S&P 500 and reinvest dividends, it's not how that, it doesn't grow linear. It doesn't grow constant. It does this. Attritional warfare, bankruptcy does the opposite, whether on the losing side or the winning side of that. And then we'll do a breakdown of these US Trump's sanctions, tariffs, speaking about 500% to try and impact Russian oil and uranium. But again, it's not that simple because you're looking at and targeting other nations. So as you can imagine, a lot to go. So let's start here. Let's start with the air defense in Ukraine. And once again, overnight, Russia has conducted a large aerial assault. Now, I don't have the specific number, but I believe it was around 170 Garand drones mixed with Iskander M and K missiles. Most of these overnight targeting in and around Kyiv. And as you know, these are used in tandem. These are not mutually exclusive to each other. It's all part of that weight of attack. Now, AMK mapping, he shows this additional firms data, so fires data, shows burning at the Artem defense plant here and at the shipbuilding plant here in Kyiv. So industrial sectors getting hit. And what I take out of this is we can see there's impacts, we can see fires, whatever, at specific areas. Now, getting a battle damage assessment is basically impossible. But what we do know from this is the Iskanders, the M and K, they are having more success as we see far more strikes. And given the figures of just the drones, more of those will be getting through as well. And this is something where I wanted to sort of clarify a little bit of something I may be wrong on. We see this from Reuters. UK to sign deals to supply air defense missiles to Ukraine with Thales to give Ukraine 5,000 air defense missiles. Now, at the end of the day, this funding is going to Thales to manufacture missiles. They don't specify which ones, nor do they give a lead time on how long it will be until these are actually shooting down things in the air. But from further reading, it appears to be more air-to-air or short-range missiles for everything from the back of trucks to slung under aircraft. Now, likely, given the numbers of these will be to take out things like Garand drones. What we know is from mid-September, we expect to see Russia launching upwards of 1,000 drones, 1,000 Garands into Ukraine on some nights. And these figures of missiles need to be, or anything to intercept, need to be massively increased. As I say, even if Ukraine was to maintain a 90% interception, well, 90% of 100 is a lot less than 90% of 1,000. Even if you 10% are getting through, well, it's 10 versus 100. And as we know, that rate is not going to sustain at 90% or whatever it may be as it grows. Now, as you may have seen a lot, I'm very critical at how a lot from the US to Russia to Ukraine to whoever, I think many overstate how effective strategic bombing actually is. That at the end of the day, to seize and hold terrain is ground operations, and these are just force multipliers. But all the knowledge that I have on strategic bombing and that others have is from World War II style open the Bombay doors boys sort of raids and missile campaigns, whether it be Iraq or Russian or Israeli or American. What we don't have, and I need to be clear on this, is we don't have knowledge on what does 1,000 Garand style drones look like night after night after night. Now, those drones can never seize and hold terrain, but how much of a force multiplier is that actually going to be? We've never seen that style of air raids before, but we will see. Now, as we know, we try and keep track of when UAC, United Aircraft Company, who build, of course, the Su aircraft, when they manufacture one of these rolls off the line, but we only do it visually. UAC today share that they've delivered more Su-34 bombers to the Russian Defense Ministry. Visually, there's at least one more that has been rolled off. And of course, these are a huge issue on the front line for Ukraine because none are getting taken down, but of course they're dropping dozens of FAB glide munitions daily, which are causing massive headaches and massive losses also on the front line. And they are being used in Russia's, what we refer to as paint by number tactics, of to hold soldiers in place with your lower types of artillery being barrel and drone, and then eliminate those hardened positions with your glide style artillery being your FABs. And I put drones, at least your FPV styles and your drone drop, not your ISR, but those as well as barrel as well as glide under artillery in the way we see it used. And we can see this here. I just want to jump onto the maps quickly. We come up into Sumy, where of course Russia holds at least 210 kilometer squares in here, likely more, but this map isn't up to date. We know Ukraine has taken back in offensive action some areas in here, and we can see it's right in this end of this arrow that I've made is where Ukraine is, but we get a good example of how FABs can be used in both a tactical sense like this and strategic sense as far as firing 30 or 40 kilometers, hitting like logistical centers behind the front line. We see multiple Ukrainian forces in this tree line here, and we do see then tree line is hit by multiple FABs. And what this shows, and why I'm showing you this, I don't like just seeing things go bang, but what this shows us a lot is that the Russian kill chain from spotting targets to putting a weapon on target has increased dramatically. The accuracy of the FABs has increased dramatically. And this is a very, very frontline area that obviously there is a confidence in this system to use it in a danger close fashion also. So let's then have a look at the maps. Of course, we have Ukraine and the capital of Kyiv in the center. We have the red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. And let's show you some data. You know that we like data, and up to July 10 at least July 10 in Australia, we have that, according to Deep State, 240 kilometer squares further being occupied by the Russian forces. So we're a third through the month, and we are at half of the previous month. So you likely will see this ramp up. Realistically, I believe this figure is probably minimum of 50% incorrect, given some geolocations and other mappers that I trust more. But again, this is why we present multiple points of data, because you can use data to skew it how you would like. Strap in for when I show you using data to skew it how you'd like, but even at the best possible case for attrition, not presenting behind the scenes what it actually is. So let's move on to the map and let's come into Terney. And we're calling this whole salient in here, this whole enveloped sector, we'll just refer to as Terney. And you can see today there has been a Russian advancement in this direction from, let's go here to here, about 3 kilometers through Vileshneve, Zeleny Hay area. Now, something that I want to point out in this again is we look at this geolocation right in here. Now, of course, this isn't at the western extreme of it, but it gives us a good example of what we're seeing more and more on the front line. We see Russian troops in small teams, likely highly mobile on scooters or motorcycles or side by side, something like that. So highly mobile small teams clearing very thinly defended but well constructed areas. And this should be of concern. So we see these Russian forces in here. Again, you can go and find this footage if you would like. I may share it on the Telegram. We see well-constructed underground defensive areas here, but we see that this has been seized and taken by only a few soldiers, at least in the footage, 4 of these highly mobile troops, which is vastly different from the large mechanized maneuver cost that we saw much earlier in the conflict. And this tells us a few things. The change in Russian tactics, but also the thinness of some of these lines, even at some of the most heavily defended areas, as far as the fortification construction. And that is what I was showing you down near Novasilia the other day. I was showing you, look how well this bunker, these fortifications are being made, but it's only defended by a few guys. So we see that advancement in here. And then we'll move our way down, come down into Toretsk, and we can see more of Toretsk being confirmed by the deep state map. Of course, deep state map is in ties with the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. So we, at least in my opinion, I'm happy to confirm that they are accepting that Russia has occupied that territory, as well as Leonidivka as well. Now, Delivkia in here, given the geolocations in this sector, likely this is red through here as well. It'll be interesting to see what Suryak, AMK and other mappers' kilometre squares are around the end. So we have on this then area, we have Kaminsky, then we have Delivkia, and so it's just this sector in here. So all the way from this railway across to basically Andriivkia up here, that he's saying that all of this has been filled in over the past weeks. A lot of this is being shown as grey. So let's continue our way down the maps, and we come to the Velika Novasilia front line. We see that down to Murnay that the Russians have had an advancement here, according to this map, of some 3.2 kilometers. Again, it's 3 kilometers day after day after day, which is a lot, considering when we need to take into account of what is a lot. Well, the 23 counteroffensive got 8 to 12 kilometers over months, and we're seeing 3 kilometers day after day after day. And of course, this does really affect where defensive positions can sit, and likely, again, from Murnay to Komar, likely all the way to Voskresneskia as well, is grey or red. And we may see this month or next month, as I keep saying, axes transform from a singular axis into a large kilometre square exploitation. We can see Tolstoy coming under control, more movement to the north, as well as from Perivkia down in this sector to Murnay, more of this coming under control. So more weighed out on that, but we'll get a better idea in the coming days and weeks. But this does show us where there are movements on these sectors. No movement in the south on Suryak or Deep State today. We have Pokrovsk, and then we have Pokrovsk Eastern Sector. Let's bring up our final map of the day, and just showing more movement to just the west of Romanivkia in the direction of Yamblanivkia. Of course, all of this is around the Konstantinivkia front line, and just a small northern push in here, and doing just like we said, that it would be up and widen, up and widen. Now, again, in here, I'm even surprised to see Russia's bothered pushing in here, as I've spoken about this salient kill zone that has been created, but maybe there was an opportunity to take some ground, and it was taken. Remember, a lot of warfare like this is reactionary as well. If there's an opportunity presented, then you need to be flexible enough and have initiative on the front line, and have your soldiers have enough initiative to be able to operate independently as well. Remember, back in 2023, I was talking to a Ukrainian special operator who said the biggest shift that we have seen, or the biggest shift that he had seen on the front line, he said, I don't care about motorbikes or quads or tanks or whatever. He said, the biggest shift that I've seen is that the Russians are willing to withdraw under their own initiative. And he said, from a soft operator like himself, he said that was the biggest change in policy that he had seen actually having a positive effect, is under their own initiative. And we've seen fighter bombers speaking that maybe some of the fighter pilots are having more initiative to carry out, well, not carry out operations, but within the operation, that their left and right of arc, or the goalposts they can work in, being a bit widened and that they can operate within that. The Australian forces, which are, due to our size, a very professional force, one of the biggest things we push on is a personal and command initiative as well. So what I said was, there's a lot of reality starting to sink in, and that can't be hidden anymore. And we're going to see more and more of this. And I was tagged in this, so I thought, why not present it? So Angelica here, replying to a photograph of her supporting Ukraine, standing up for Ukraine on day 100 of Russia's illegal invasion, has then written this. Where were you when you took the Ukrainian flag off your bio? I think for many of us, it's when we realised that there were two wars going on. The propaganda war in the Western media of feel-good stories of plucky Ukrainian resilience, and the actual war on the ground. And I've been saying this again and again, that there are multiple wars. I'd go forward and say there's a third. There's a third, greyer, more proxy war going on to try and limit other great states' power too. But let's stick on these. Where Ukrainians are fighting and dying while being set up for failure by delayed weapons deliveries, unrealistic expectations of victory, and refusal to negotiate when leverage still existed. Leverage still does exist for Ukraine in a negotiated process. It absolutely still does exist. But you can have any cards you want in your hand. Those cards only have use, whether it is in diplomacy or in Texas Hold'em poker. They only have use if you're willing to play those cards. And the cards of which Ukraine has, they are not willing to play, at least at this point in time. It would be much easier for me not to speak up on this and just shut the fuck up, stick to my lane, stick to energy, hell, and stick to China. But I can't choose silence when, in my opinion, lives are being wasted. Killboxes and impossible salients. If you follow the excellent daily updates, videos of defence politics, you'll notice a curious phenomenon. Ukrainian defenders will hold onto a location as Russian forces flank them like a pincer. You'd expect the pincer to close, or for the Ukrainian defenders to retreat before that can happen. But something more curious happens. The Russian forces appear to have no great appetite for taking the territory. Instead, the pincers extend, leaving the Ukrainian defenders in what is now called an impossible salient. But as DPA says, impossible salient is impossible. And at some point, you realise the guys in there are dead or as good as dead. So let's have a look at the maps. And a lot of you, of course, can follow the history of this war and know that the extension of pincers. So we see from Velika to the west of Pokrovsk, we have Toretsk, we have Siversk, we have Toretsk, we have Kupiansk sector that are getting developed salients. But let's go into Terni, and this is what I'm talking about. This isn't just a salient though where you can come in and out east to west. No, you've got to come through this one doorway that is open in here. And that's why this area has concerned me the most. And we've seen it happen from Avdiivka to Bakhmut to Mariupol, about securing the flanks and attriting forces. This has happened again and again. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Chasiv Yar, I think Pokrovsk soon. It takes the Russians absolutely ages to take each town. Ukrainians boast, yeah, well, we've turned them into killboxes, meat grinders for the Russians. Excuse me. If you are the ones inside the impossible salient, you are the ones that's being killboxed. If you're the one who don't get the command to retreat before retreat becomes impossible, you are the meat inside the grinder. If you are surrounded on three sides and your enemy has an overmatch in artillery and manpower, you are the ones inside of that killbox. And this is where we say that there is two different wars going on for what the two states are trying to achieve. Ukraine is fighting for terrain. They want to fight for terrain-backed border areas. Russia is fighting to reduce Ukrainian potential, both politically and militarily, to influence political decisions through military actions. But they are first and foremost trying to reduce potential, to influence Ukraine never joining NATO, and to have territory then as a byproduct of attrition, not the other way around. To not have then territory made, but attrition the other way. The goal of attrition is to reduce potential of the other side. And that's why we see the flanks get made, and why are they not closing it up? Why are they not closing it up? This is the reason. Kursk, the stupidest kill box of them all. Who remembers the jubilant headlines of Ukrainian troops doing a switcheroo and heading into Kursk? Oh, well, all the NATO accounts had a field day. Instantly, the same day I believe, Willie OAM, who I hear has a massive knob, pointed out the utter idiocy of the campaign. And I got dragged like you wouldn't believe. But I turned out, in my opinion, I turned out to be 100% correct on this. You were telling me you are fighting a war of attrition and you're already spread thin, and you chose to take some of your best guys and YOLO it into a bunch of potato fields. If it was a limited raid with the best soldiers, absolutely, it would have been as successful as it was in those initial days and wouldn't have had the huge, then double-edged sword that we have seen. And yes, these went against Russian conscripts in this area with the best forces, vehicles, command, everything, and we've seen what it's turned into. The Russians didn't even bother shutting it down quickly. Just let the Ukrainian elite units hang out until they get picked off by second guys. Exactly what we said at the time is what Russia should do. Go back and watch my videos if you'd like, is put just enough to stabilize or slow it down and push harder in the east. And that's exactly what we saw happen. I mean, then we saw the kilometre squares for Russia increase massively. In the meantime, the Russians pushed harder than ever in the eastern front. And now, does Ukraine even hold any of Kursk? No, they've been pushed entirely out. And the Russians have now created a new front in Sumy. And what was it all for? I'm not defeatist, I'm counting. Again and again, I've been told, look how much the Russians suck. Look how little those lines have been moved. Yeah, it's because they're fighting a war of attrition and the Russians have the numerical, artillery and drone advantage despite the Ukrainian Western supplies. I believe it's 3-to-1 advantage still for artillery for the Russians. That's probably at best. Oh, but it's better artillery. No, with artillery first you need enough. And the actual difference in artillery quality and quantity, it still has an advantage towards the Russian side. We do know the Russians probably have an advantage in drones at the moment as well, especially with the FPVs, and there is no analogue for things like glide munitions that I still put under artillery as a whole. I don't know how close we are to the endgame, but it's going to happen when Ukraine can no longer hold their lines. And when it happens, the collapse will be like the breaking of a dam, or as I say, bankruptcy, and that is breaking of a dam. A dam doesn't just start flowing at 10 litres a minute and maintain that constant or linear rate. No. A dam has a trickle of water, and I'll look at that. And next thing it busts and everything is flooded. Let's continue. We know the Ukrainians are straining for men. They've resisted and resisted conscripting the 18 to 25-year-olds because when you do that, you are really eating your seed corn as a country. The problem is, this is where I say that this is a paradox. Because this war is existential. But it's saying that if we recruit these people, it's existential as well. You get what I mean? But the yoinking of randoms off the streets of Odessa, which is now people are looking at it being completely unlawful, we'll talk more about that in the future, are now not pretty normal, completely normal. Meanwhile, the Russians have better, longer training and rotated regularly on and off so they can rest. And this is one of the things, is due to that larger number, you can have more of your regular time training and rotation. You tell me how it's going to end. But Angelica, you can't be defeatist. If we are not doing enough, then we should be doing more. Girl, it's 2025. We could have done more in 22, 23, certainly. But at this point, don't tell me, oh, but the GDP of Russia has that of Italy. Surely, or that Russia can't possibly last, or worst of all, Putin is losing power. We've heard it over and over for the last 3 years and more. And this is one of these things. We could have done a lot more a lot earlier, but the rhetoric versus reality of supplies was very, very different. The shape that the new Ukraine will take is not what any of us wished it would be by the year the war started in 22. The Ukrainians truly earned our support and assistance with their bravery. They inspired the world. But life is not a movie, and we are not on track for a fairy tale ending. To what degree do we owe Ukrainians more support? Maybe with an encouraging nudge that they should start conscripting 18 to 25-year-olds, like we've been giving them, and to what degree is time fast forward to the reality of a partition? What does victory look like for Ukraine in 25? 1991 borders, 2014 borders. What about more Ukrainians left to live? And this is where we have said, and I believe we are seeing very slowly, we are seeing a shifting in the narratives around what is acceptable victory. But that is moving very slowly. But I think Russia's moving that goalpost slowly as well into wanting more and more. So what do we see as this closing off? Well, we do not know, because as much as Europe would like to ignore that there are two parties involved in this war, there are two parties involved. And at this point, it's going to be more difficult to get Russia to stop than Ukraine to stop. We do not have the leverage over Russia that we do over Ukraine. You need both to stop the war, but Russia's got a lot less incentive to stop, because if the Russians can do one thing, they can do attritional war. Okay, we've seen that many times, and we're seeing that play out here. You've seen me present attritional warfare doctrine over the past years, and how literally in the Kremlin they've been ticking and flicking this off. And that is the issue, is it's going to be the, you're going to have to incentivize either through military action or a carrot. And no one's willing to hang or dangle a carrot. So let's look at this Economist article here. The graphic detail of the final push. Russia's summer Ukraine offensive looks like its deadliest yet. But in the beginning of this, let's have a look at this and maybe give some credibility to the article. See, how much credibility should we actually put on this, okay? Heavy fire continues across the Dnieper River into Kherson. Much of this is caused by Russian drone strikes on farmland rather than a serious attempt to advance. A rumoured Russian amphibious assault, not going to happen, is yet to happen. It's not going to happen at that amount. But no one is using expensive assets against farmland, okay? You see assets getting fired in, it has some level of target to go after, okay? No one is just firing shit into farmland. It's either it has some sense of tying up something, hitting something, striking, whatever. No one uses expensive equipment like that just in absolute waste. Now, some artillery, maybe some, but not like overall. You can't say there's heavy fire into farmland. I don't know, you're smoking the good shit. In the north, 50,000 strong Russian forces attacking Sumy, okay? So not questioning Sursky's claim at all, okay? We're just setting up the groundwork for how much should we take this article on face value or not. Ukraine is badly outnumbered, but officials say the front is holding. Realistically, we believe it's probably around 10% of this 50,000 figure is what the Russians actually have up in Sumy. Trust me, it would be looking significantly different if there was 50,000 combat troops in that area. Not only of movement, but of losses as well. In the northeast, Russian losses, you've got that much in there, you're going to be getting a lot more footage. Russia is advancing in Borova and Seversk, tactical waypoints en route to the last remaining Ukrainian strongholds in the Donbass. Now, correct, but we also need to say these areas, these haven't moved for a number of years. Gives us an idea about the defences in those areas. Russia's main effort is further south, Pokrovsk, Konstantinivka. Main effort, I'd still put, is attrition, but territorial effort, okay? Two important logistical hubs for Ukraine are being pummeled by the full weight of Putin's army. Whether they hold could decide the fate of the Eastern Front, okay? So set that there, okay? Captured Russian officers in Ukraine reportedly say the summer offensive was presented to them as one last push. I haven't seen any officers say this. Maybe they have. Maybe it's also being presented as there's one last push and then the war's going to end. Okay, if we can survive until winter, we're good. Mr. Putin seemed intent on breaking Ukrainian morale and snatching a victory after more than 3 years of war. Now, I agree that Putin wants to do that, and I don't agree that it's one last push. I believe Putin goes, if we have to fight for a number of years and not have one last push, remember, attritional warfare is not won through a decisive victory. That's what this would be suggesting. No, it's won through constant pressure and grinding. There is no official tally of losses on either side, of their own side, but Daily War Trackers offers some clues. Okay, so let's see where they're taking this from. They're taking from some of their satellite data and estimates of casualties from Western governments and independent researchers, okay? So what they're basing these figures off is off Western numbers and independent numbers apparently too, okay? By combining this data, we can for the first time provide a credible daily death toll or an estimate of numbers. So a high and low in this. Now still, As I say, with any figures in here, a lot of figures, or basically all figures, are released to have an informational purpose. And they show in here estimated total Russian losses, and saying that it is increasing in the cost too. As of July 9th, our tracker suggests there have been between 900 and 1.3 million Russian casualties since the war began, including some 190 to 350,000 deaths, which puts the total casualties above 1 million by the end of June. Okay? Our numbers suggest roughly 31,000 Russians may have been killed in the summer offensive so far, which began in earnest on May the 1st. Okay, so again, with these numbers, you need to take it with a grain of salt. But there's a reason I'm showing you these numbers. There is too little data to generate a comparable live estimate for Ukraine. No, there's not. You have the same amount of data, you're just not willing to use it. So you're willing to use Western government's predictions and Ukrainian government predictions, but you're not willing to use then Russian predictions or independent Russian bloggers' predictions as well, or some others as well, okay? But again, there isn't that much real data on Russian or Ukrainian losses. However, a catalogue of the known dead and missing of UA losses, a website that implies between 73,000 and 140,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died since the invasion began. We know Ukraine has tens of thousands of missing as well. What I will say is if we take both the low end, so we're going, we take the low end of the Russian losses of 190,000, KIA, and the low end of the Ukrainian at 73,000. That still presents a favourable rate of attrition to Russia. We take the high end of both. It still presents a favourable rate of attrition, okay? Even using these numbers, of which this is much of an informational warfare piece as anything. Russia's rising death toll is the result of movements on the ground. Our data suggests its current pace of advance is among the fastest in 2 years. And it gives us here the daily change of control. We do know that this rate of control is increasing. But what I'll say is attrition rate is war is not as simple as a ratio of population. On the face value it is. On the face value you go, X country has 100 million, other country has 200 million, therefore you need a 2-to-1 attrition ratio. That's not exactly how it works at all in then protracted conflict, because then you have to take into account people's willingness to fight, your recruiting ability, and how many people you can conscript as well. So yes, Russia has 3 to 4 times the population. Okay, so it gives that you need to have a 3 to 4 to 1 attritional rate to be neutral on that, right? But Russia is also recruiting significantly more people, having a significantly easier time doing that as well. So the real attrition rate is likely much more unfavourable than that again, okay? So it's not just as simple as population versus population. It has to be the willingness and the ability for the population to get guys into the fight as well. Ukraine's still putting up a mighty defence against a far bigger power. Despite the summer push and delays, weapon shipments from America, Russia has little to show for its advances. Still a fair bit given the years prior. The current offensive still works out to just 15 square kilometres per day. Even at the quicker pace the last 30 days, it would take another 89 years to conquer all of Ukraine. And my brain tumour is growing at the same exponential fucking rate. This is just not how attritional war works, okay? It's just, as she went over previously in the post we just read, this is not how dam busting, bankruptcy, whatever, but these figures that's used to set this. Putin seems undeterred. His armed forces are recruiting 10 to 15,000 more troops per month than Ukraine's are. This is exactly the point that goes into this, that attrition rate is not just a ratio of population. Not only is Russia's population 3 to 4 times the size of Ukraine's, he's then also recruiting 10 to 15,000 more troops than Ukraine as well. And that's probably at best figures, it's probably more around 30,000 per month. We don't know what Ukraine's figures are, but we know there was bragging about recruiting, how many was it? But it was very, very low. It was around 1,000, I believe. And again, this tells us a lot. And when we go into this 30,000 that have been lost apparently since May the 1st, it's still in a positive rate of attrition in their own force as well. Okay, so the number of troops is still growing also. So it gives us a good idea of trying to see what is setting an environment, but even given those figures, even given informational warfare figures, we still go, yeah, but it's still not positive here, using likely very biased information. Let's talk about US sanctions. Trump, this is by Politico, is interested in new Russian sanctions, but there's a catch. As support builds behind the bipartisan bill, the White House is seeking changes that would expand the president's control. Now, in this article, there's a lot of anonymity in the sources too, which to me, when it's always anonymous, it reads like, to me, trying to pigeonhole policy for the White House before it's then released. It's trying to like soft launch it more so. Now, let's look further through this. Trump is ready to sign a punishing Russian sanctions bill that GOP hawks have pushed for months, but only if the changes give him more control. Lindsey Graham has said that conceptually there is openness to this. The current draft bill allows the president to waive up to 500% tariff on countries that buy Russian oil and uranium for up to 180 days. This official here has said the current version would subject the president's foreign policy decisions to micromanagement by Congress through a joint resolution of disapproval process. And that's a non-starter for us. So saying that we don't want micromanaging by Congress. The administration is not going to be micromanaged by Congress on the president's foreign policy. The bill needs a waiver authority that is complete, okay? But also, there's a reason why Congress has say in this as well. Key points on this, so we don't have to go through the whole thing. Trump, that he's open to further Russian sanctions, but demands full control over their implementation. The administration rejects congressional oversight, calling it micromanagement. Trump, he's had a shifting of signal from failed diplomatic efforts to that it's more of a personal frustration with Putin. The bill includes a 500% tariff on countries buying Russian oil and uranium, but allows waivers in this. This is the thing though with secondary sanctions. Well, who's buying that? It's going to be very, very difficult to actually tariff sanction these nations and companies as well. And it is a huge breach of sovereignty and independence of these nations too. Lindsey Graham, he's agreed to revise the bill and allow Trump more flexibility. Despite large bipartisan Senate support, some Republicans are holding back until Trump gives clear public backing, holding back a lot of anonymity. It feels like the White House is grandfathering something through. The White House expects Congress to cave and give Trump full discretion. So let's go a little bit over before we see the issues in this. Trump's new willingness to engage with Congress on a sanctions bill underscores his growing frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who says he has rebuffed efforts to negotiate an end to the bloodshed in Ukraine. One Republican operative close to the White House said, for the president now, he has invested his own reputation of being able to negotiate anything anywhere, but Putin has made him look foolish. Keep a note in that. Trump said it's a lot of bullshit and he's looking very strongly at sanctions bills. Speaker Johnson threw his support behind the sanctions push. Vladimir Putin has shown an unwillingness to be reasonable and talk seriously about brokering peace, and I think we have to send him a message. What I will say is Russia has shown willingness to speak about brokering peace, but they keep saying it needs to take into account their security concern and the situation on the battlefield. And no one has actually presented any plans yet that actually do take into account the situation on the battlefield and the situation not only in the battlefield, but the situation economically for Russia and attritionally for Ukraine as well. Now, issues I see in this of a country that is willing to hide a legitimate pedo island. But issues I see is the bill basically reduces congressional oversight and handing full foreign policy control to Trump, which undermines the checks and balances of why they are there in the first place. And it can set a precedent and slippery slope. Now, Trump, he isn't just backing sanctions out of principle and strategic reasons. He's reacting emotionally because Putin embarrassed him. And Putin embarrassed Trump. And Trump's ego has taken a hit there, as we can see in spoken about his reputation. And this isn't just diplomatically, the principle here, it's also personal here too, which can have large effect. It can, of course, affect very negatively. Graham admits the bill is more about giving Trump leverage than punishing Russia. So it's leverage of which Trump didn't have before, I believe is what he actually said. But this, again, this is more political theatre, political theatre, because there has been zero detail about how effective these sanctions would actually be, other than saying that it's going to give Trump leverage. How effective it's going to be, no one's presented anything on that. And there's been no comment on if this would actually meaningfully hurt Russia or if Russia would just trade elsewhere. And are we really going to implement this on third parties as well? And what effect is that going to have in reverse of then reactionary tariffs and sanctions as well? It ignores all the issues with this. Also the issues around sovereignty, independent ability to choose your own path in nations as well. Secondary sanctions is a very, very extreme thing to do, especially for the US. Maybe it'll go through, but you're doing it on China, India, one of which is an ally, one of which is a near-peer power, larger purchasing power, parity GDP, massive global influence, and it's not going to be we tariff this and we have no effect, not at all. Trump wants to slam sanctions on Russia while also keeping the door open for some deal with Putin. And this is the thing, is Trump wants it all. He wants to be able to, we want to open up some deal and work with Putin and do this, while also supplying offensive weapons, ISR to be used in offensive capacity, and secondary sanctions on the nations. And as I've said, what these nations may do is not go, right, we have to bend the knee. They may go, this is our time to jump ship and move forward into things like BRICS. While no one's actually been saying how effective this will actually be, because previously it hasn't been this intense, but it also had very limited effect of what we have actually seen. Legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and looking after yourself. I will likely speak to you tomorrow, but I'm unsure if there's other bits and pieces on around the wedding. So have a great day. I'll have a great day tomorrow as well, and I will speak to you. I'll speak to you when I speak to you. Okay, thank you. See ya.